So finally, we have confirmation that Michael Steele, one of the two men who were convicted of the murders of the Essex boys, Tate, Tony Tucker and Craig Rolfe, has indeed been released from prison. Firstly, I'll take you through an article discussing this latest development, then discuss the gagging order which is now in place concerning these two individuals. Take a listen to the following. Michael Steele, a triple murderer convicted of the infamous Essex boys' gangland killings, has been released from prison, as confirmed by the Ministry of Justice. Steele was sentenced to life imprisonment in 1998 for the murders of Tony Tucker, Tate and Craig Rolfe, crimes he denied, alongside co-defendant Jack Womes. The victims were discovered shot dead in a Range Rover in Rettendon near Chelmsford, Essex in 1995. A parole board decided in February to release Steele, now in his 80s, stating that his continued incarceration was, quote, no longer necessary for the protection of the public. However, Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood challenged this decision, requesting a review of his case on the grounds that the decision was legally irrational. Despite this, Steele was released from prison in May, as confirmed by the Ministry of Justice. A spokesperson for the government department stated, "Our thoughts remain with the family and friends of Craig Rolfe, Tony Tucker and Tate. This decision was made by the independent Parole Board after a thorough risk assessment. Michael Steele will be on licence for the rest of his life, with strict conditions and intensive probation supervision. He faces an immediate return to prison if he breaks the rules." Prosecutors said the murders occurred following a dispute over a drug deal, and the case later inspired the 2000 film Essex Boys starring Sean Bean. The decision to release Steele in February came during the second review by the Parole Board, following the end of his initial minimum term of 23 years imprisonment. The Parole Board has disclosed that while in prison, Steele wasn't deemed apt for formal risk reduction measures as he professed innocence for the murders and had no apparent need. The report highlighted past risk factors, including his criminal lifestyle, involvement with drugs, and association with the wrong people. Despite this, they noted Steele's marked improvement in behaviour behind bars, convincing them he doesn't pose immediate risks after release. Parole Board documents uncovered by the newspaper lays bare Steele's life behind bars, in which he is said to have been an exemplary inmate, except for one occasion when he was caught with a kettle. A 2021 report stated, quote, he has only ever had 2 proven adjudications on this sentence, the most recent one being in January 2021 for having an unauthorised item in his possession, a kettle for which he was given a caution. Despite his impeccable behaviour, the prison authorities have refused to downgrade his status, and he has spent his entire sentence in maximum security conditions. Strict release conditions for Steele entail living at an approved address, abiding by good behaviour, revealing financial dealings, surrendering his passport, and complying with electronic tagging and a curfew. He's also barred from high-tech gadgetry, speaking to media, and owning any boat, plane or firearm. Meanwhile, Womes, aged 59, was greenlit for release in 2021. Okay, so very positive news there for supporters of Michael Steele, with the news that his release did indeed take place last month. Now, one of the biggest issues that many will have regarding the release of Michael Steele and also Jack Womes is the fact that neither of these individuals appear to be able to speak to the media. There appears to be some kind of gagging order in place which quite naturally would prevent the public from hearing their side of this very intriguing story. Now, as many people know, the time spent in prison for both Jack Womes and Michael Steele varied greatly. You had Jack Womes, who, like Michael Steele, started as a Category A high-security prisoner, but he was able to work his way through the prison system to a Category B, Category C, an open prison, and eventually his release. Whereas Michael Steele spent every day of his sentence since his incarceration in 1998 as a high-security Category A prisoner. Now, many people will say, well, Jack Womes was a role model prisoner. It afforded him the ability to work his way through the prison system to his eventual release. He learnt to read and write in prison. He was teaching other prisoners. whereas Michael Steele didn't appear to comply with the prison authorities. There were occasions when he sued the prison service for what he deemed to be poor treatment, and in general his attitude was deemed not as constructive compared to that of his co-defendant Jack Womes. However, recently, this idea seems to have been disproven to a large extent by the recently released Parole Board document that clearly states that Michael Steele was in fact a well-behaved prisoner and could well have been downgraded a lot sooner. But instead of being downgraded, he was simply moved to a different Category A prison. So, two very different paths for both of these individuals in Michael Steele and Jack Womes. So taking a look at why a released prisoner may be restricted from contacting media or other publications, it states the following here. Some released prisoners are restricted from speaking to the media, particularly during their period of supervision, to protect the public, prevent reoffending, and ensure the safety of victims and witnesses. Okay, so let's take a look at those in isolation for a second. To protect the public, well, if Michael Steele came out and said, look, I'm innocent of these murders, this is what I believe happened, this is what I was doing on December the 6th, if he actually came out and spoke to the public, I'm not really sure how that would put the public in any enhanced danger whatsoever. I don't really get that at all. To protect the public, not really sure that's applicable. Prevent reoffending. Again, is that applicable? Most likely not. And ensure the safety of victims and witnesses. Now, I can't speak for the family members of Tucker, Tate and Rolfe, but I'm fairly sure that Brian Rolfe, who is Craig Rolfe's brother, and I'm sure will most likely comment on this particular video, I'm sure that he would most likely like to hear from Michael Steele and hear what Michael Steele has to say, Michael Steele's version of events, what Michael Steele was doing on the evening of December the 6th, and who Michael Steele himself believes is actually responsible for this triple murder. It also says, here's a more detailed explanation. Public protection. Restrictions on media contact are often used to manage public safety and prevent the possibility of the released individual reoffending, potentially jeopardizing the public's safety. Victim and witness protection. Conditions may restrict media contact to protect victims and witnesses from undue publicity, embarrassment, or potential harm if they are identified. Rehabilitation. Restrictions can also help the offender focus on rehabilitation and reintegration into society, rather than engaging in activities that might hinder their progress or exacerbate public concerns. Licence conditions. Released offenders are subject to a series of conditions, including restrictions on media contact, which are designed to manage risk and ensure compliance with the law. Now, the next one is the most important, or at least the most interesting. Exceptional circumstances. There are exceptions to these restrictions, typically in situations where the prisoner's claim of innocence is being challenged, or there's a strong public interest in the matter. Now, surely those two boxes are wholeheartedly ticked. Because by all accounts, well, we've been told recently, haven't we, that the CCRC have now received new material, they're considering new material, and whether to, refer the case back to the Court of Appeal or the very next stage. By all accounts, the CCRC are in receipt of new information. These two individuals have always protested their innocence, and naturally, based on the fact we have probably 7 or 8 Rise of the Foot Soldier films, and I've done about 300 videos on this particular case, there must be a fairly strong public interest in the case as a whole. So surely, you would have thought that Michael Steele and Jack Womes fall into that category of exceptional circumstances. Let me know some of your thoughts down in the comments section below.